Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy has finally been unleashed to all platforms, and boys, there are a lot to talk about. Instead of doing your typical review, alternatively we'll be performing an in-depth analysis of game mechanics, core improvements and downgrades over the source material. So grab a chair and get comfy as we take a look to see how the reimagining of a classic has fared. Unless your name's Stevie Wonder, I won't have to describe how good these graphics look. The almost Pixar quality of the visuals enables one of the most impressive openings I've witnessed in a long time. Pretty much everything in the aesthetic department looks pretty lush, with just one outlier being the fur shader. It looks pretty good at a distance, but once the camera moves in close, I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't look great. But overall, the art team did an exquisite job. My first gripe with the game is they changed Crash's character. See, here's the thing, Vicarious Visions weren't the first who changed the character. It was actually Naughty Dog. The change that I didn't like was that they made Crash dumb. In Crash 1 he was clumsy, but he wasn't stupid. Instead he was a genetically modified mischievous menace. This made the idea of Crash single-handedly taking on Dr. Cortex's entire genetically modified military empire and winning somewhat believable. In Crash 2, he was basically made into a dumbass in an effort to try and make him appeal more to kids, and unfortunately, dumb Crash is now in all three of the games. The original Crash had a dark and somewhat creepy undertone. This was evident as early as the game's opening cutscene, but it started to kick in around a third of the way into the game, where the music, art style and creature design gradually started shifting in this direction. Yet in the remaster, all of these creepy subtleties have been toned down or, in some cases, completely removed, which is a real shame, as the atmosphere did a lot to distinguish Crash from all the other generic kid-friendly platformers at the time. The generator room in particular is not creepy at all anymore for a few reasons. The biggest two is the change in the music style and the surveillance monitors, with Cortex's unsettling overwatch now replaced with a much less spooky showing. So the music, it's fine. It's fine. But going from melodic ear porn to fine is a downgrade, folks. It's a downgrade. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with the remastered music. Like I said, it's fine. There's just two problems I have with it. The majority of the remastered music lacks confidence and presence. It's as if the music doesn't believe in itself enough, so instead it self-downgrades from badass platformer mixtape to catchy background elevator music, which, similar to elevator themes, is forgotten the moment you step out the area from which it's being played. The second problem is the mixing. The mix of the original soundtrack had flavour, bite, depth, varying levels of volume and ranges, and interesting choices of samples. The remastered mixing, most of the time, is fairly bland and generic, and a handful of good tracks suffer from the noise wars phenomenon, and as a result, a lot of the subtlety is lost and it all just kind of mushes together. The reason why the original tracks were so atmospheric and well tuned in with the gameplay was because the music composer, Josh Mansell, sat down and actually played each and every level, taking notes about the style of the level and how the tempo of the gameplay felt, then went and translated those emotions into a music track, custom built for each specific level, similar to what Marty O'Donnell did when creating the Halo soundtrack. There are a few standout tunes in the remaster. For example, I actually like the new Temple Ruins theme. It's just that its ambience and atmosphere isn't as fitting compared to the original. Recently I made quite an interesting discovery, and that is Josh Mansell, the original composer for Crash mentioned earlier, has released uncompressed versions of the original soundtrack, and the quality difference is so great, well, I'll just let you listen. Fans are split on the remastered music, but if we had the option to toggle between the new and old uncompressed soundtracks, that would likely solve the community's biggest gripe with an otherwise cracking game. If they let us buy the soundtrack as separate DLC and split the money with Mansell, that would be a great thing. Or a physical release of all 3 original game soundtracks in a single package would be really, really nice. Most of the combat and movement tricks in OG Crash have been successfully ported over. Small things such as being able to smash 2 crates, then run under the third to have it break on your head saving time, jumping up slippery slopes to maintain speed, spin attacking mid-jump on rollers to hit the next one, even small things like alternating direction whilst bouncing on crates to keep Crash perpetually flipping has been maintained. This is a sign of a competent remaster. Not all mechanics made it through intact though, one of those being the shadows. Crash's shadow is an integral part of knowing where he'll land when he's out of shot. This is most apparent during the High Road Bridge mission when bouncing on turtles. In the original game, the shadow was a solid black circle, and the core of which marks the centre of Crash's hitbox, making it easy to track Crash's exact position. In the remaster, Crash's shadow is no longer a circle and is instead a more realistic and defined effect. Whilst artistically it does look cool, when Crash is doing front flips mid-air, it can be hard to gauge exactly where the hitbox is. You can tell the developers were aware of this, as when you're playing on bridge levels, the shadow switches to a circular one when crossing between planks, which ironically looks buggy and out of place. In the original game, platforming can be boiled down to 3 key aspects: timing, momentum, and trajectory. Every jump will always involve at least one of these elements, often all 3. In the remaster, they've removed momentum from Crash's character controller. Now when I say they've removed momentum, I'm not saying that momentum is now less pronounced. I'm saying that they've removed momentum, which as a result makes Crash feel very weightless and robotically precise. Whilst that may sound great on paper, it does bring with it adverse effects, and some of which cannot be explained with mere papere. For example, you can now cancel out of jumps with ease at almost any point. Because there is very little acceleration and inertia, you can maneuver Crash mid-air with near instant response, which you simply could not do in the original game. Now there's a flip side to removing momentum, in which that if in the original game you wanted to make a short jump, you could just release the controls mid-flight and the momentum would still keep you moving, albeit at a slightly reduced rate. Yet with the remaster, releasing the controls mid-air will cause you to freeze and fall in place. It takes a lot of getting used to, and honestly it just doesn't quite feel as good. While some of the mechanics did see some downgrades, what I'm happy to report is that the rest of the game saw a lot of objectively superior upgrades. Most of said improvements are actually features backported from Crash Warped. Things such as destroying an Aku Aku box now automatically adds a power up to Crash. You're now told how many boxes you've collected at the end of a level before you go through the warp gate, and spawns a crystal in said level, so you don't have to guess anymore whether you've missed any crates. Though the pickup sound and animation of the gems could be a bit more satisfying. Multi-fruit crates now give you 2 fruit per bounce instead of 1 to save tedium. And finally, you no longer have to earn your save files through bonus levels. Hooray chaps! You can now retry bonus levels, which is nice, along with another backport from Warped being that crates in the bonus levels now count towards the total crate count. Honestly, I preferred it when the crates weren't counted in the bonus levels and not being able to retry them, as it made them feel like, well, bonus levels, but now they feel more like level extensions, which is fine, but it removes a lot of the tension and temptation to be greedy when you can just retry them again. Thankfully, you can retry the Cortex bonus missions now, considering the fact that they house the keys necessary to unlock the secret levels in order to achieve 100%. Yeah, that one was an upgrade. Boss fights ironically were the easiest levels in the original Crash, though Vicarious Visions did toughen them up a bit in various ways, but it doesn't change the fact that they are still a breeze compared to the grueling platformer levels. The only criticism I have for the new boss fights is that Crash doesn't yeehaw anymore. I want my yeehaw. You can now play as Coco, which is cool. Whilst the mechanics are identical, Coco's front flip animation during a jump feels more satisfying than Crash's, and if it weren't for my manhood being at stake, I would play Coco a lot more often. Time trials have been added as well, making for a nice excuse to replay the levels all over again. We also got an additional level added to Crash 1, being Stormy Ascent, a level cut from the original for being too hard, if you can believe that. Crash Warped also got another level named Future Tense. Instead of cut content, it's an entirely bespoke creation, taking inspirations from various cut concepts throughout the franchise, along with some fresh twists. My first impression of Future Tense was, if this isn't a design prototype for the next Crash Bandicoot game, I don't know what is. Frame rate is pretty important in a 3D platformer, but even if you have a potato rig, you should have no problem hitting 60 frames per second. Speaking of potatoes, you might be wondering what the frame rate is on all the consoles. Yeah, it's 30 frames. Now, what's strange is Digital Foundry used a PC with what is basically the same CPU as the Xbox One X, except with half the core count and a much weaker GPU, yet was still able to achieve 60 FPS locked, so who knows what's going on there. So with all that said, is the Insane Trilogy worth your time? Abso-frickin-lutely. Whilst it does have a different feel to it in many ways, it's still a fantastic set of games. You can tell playing it that it was made by big fans of the source material, bringing with it tons of quality of life improvements and offering new features such as the bonus levels and 60 FPS on PC. In a nutshell, it's the best way for newcomers to experience the trilogy, and at the same time, does enough to make it feel fresh to those of us who have played the originals. I don't really plug that often because it's boring, but I've got a Twitter, I've got a Patreon if you want to support me. I've also just launched a PayPal if you prefer doing a one-off donation. And yeah, all of those links are in the description, and I'd appreciate it if you check them out. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take it easy.